Let me start with something simple. When people ask, are we alone in the universe? Most of the answers come from belief, fear, or hope. But there is another possibility we don't talk about very often. What if we are not alone? Not hiding, not being watched in some crude or primitive way. What if we are simply earlier on the same path? And what if the silence we keep encountering isn't absence at all, but a difference in time? That's what I want to talk about today. Discussions around the Fermi Paradox usually begin with numbers, probability, statistics, not belief, not emotion. And from that perspective, the question, are we alone, often leads to a cautious answer. Probably not. We know the universe is unimaginably vast. Billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, and enormous number of planets. So the idea that life exists elsewhere no longer feels extraordinary. And yet, there is a tension we can't ignore. For decades, we've been listening to stories, witness accounts, alleged encounters, military reports, scientific debates. Some governments have officially acknowledged the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, things we still can't fully explain. And despite all of this, there is still no solid, physical, undeniable evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. That gap between expectation and evidence is what makes this question so powerful. At the same time, a familiar narrative keeps repeating itself, and advanced civilization is always almost here. Always approaching, always just one step away from contact. Something appears on the horizon, but the moment of arrival never actually happens. People become emotionally invested in this idea. They follow every rumor, every disclosure, every new image or document, hoping this will finally be the one, but it never is. Then another explanation enters the picture, that they are already here, that they're working with governments, that a hidden process is unfolding behind closed doors, that advanced technologies are being studied in secret. This is where I start to hesitate, because these explanations feel very human. Why would a non-human, highly advanced civilization choose to organize contact through the structures we created? Why borders? Why nations? Why political power systems? These are not universal truths. They are social arrangements we invented. This way of thinking reminds me of humanity's older belief systems. In Greek mythology, gods looked like humans and behaved like humans. They argued, took sides, competed. In ancient Egyptian belief, gods were embedded directly into human order. Pharaohs were considered part of divine lineage, and cosmic balance was reflected through earthly hierarchy. In northern traditions, figures like Thor represented immense natural forces. Yet they were still deeply tied to human struggles. Conflict, honor, war. Different cultures, different geographies, but the same instinct. Explaining the unknown by shaping it in familiar human forms. And I think we may be doing something similar today. I want to approach this from a slightly more mathematical angle. When you multiply 0 by any number, the result doesn't change. 0 times 3 is 0. 0 times 10 trillion is still 0. The number grows, it looks more impressive, but for 0, neither value actually means anything. The outcome is the same. Now imagine applying that idea to development. If we try to express a civilization's level of advancement as a number, and that number set far beyond our scale. Let's say at 1000, then from that point of view, does it really matter whether we are at 1 or 2? There may be a technical difference. But does it create a meaningful distinction? That's why it is difficult for me to imagine such a civilization making decisions based on our internal divisions. Who is more powerful, more organized, more influential? From that distance, individual parts lose importance, and the whole becomes what matters. If such a civilization exists, it wouldn't see us as nations or states, it would see us as Earth. One species, fragmented, yes, but still one. That leads to a deeper question. What would the social structure of such a civilization even look like? Maybe there is no central authority. Maybe decision making isn't hierarchical. Maybe communication itself operates in a way we don't yet understand. It might not resemble a state. It might not resemble anything familiar to us. And most importantly, if they aren't human, why would they behave in human ways? Now, I want to clarify something important. People often say, maybe they observe us, the way we observe ants. I don't think that framing is quite right, because it assumes such an extreme gap in awareness. That understanding becomes impossible. It implies that one side has meaning and the other does not. That's not what I am suggesting. What I have in mind is more subtle. Think of one highly developed ant colony observing another ant colony. The same form of life, similar ways of interacting with the world, but very different levels of organization and experience. The difference isn't between intelligence or no intelligence. It's between where each one is in its development. In that sense, we are not incapable of understanding. We are not insignificant. We are simply earlier. Earlier in how we structure society. Earlier in how we manage conflict. Earlier in how we relate to technology, cooperation, and power. If such a civilization exists, it may not be looking down on us. It might be looking at us the way you look at your own past, with recognition. The questions we are asking today, they may have asked a very long time ago. The problems we are struggling with, they may have already lived through, failed at, learned from, and moved beyond. So this isn't about being hidden or contained. It is not about being kept unaware. It is about time, about distance, measured in experience, not value, about 2 points on the same cognitive path, separated by development. That brings us to an uncomfortable question. Before asking, why don't they contact us? Maybe we should ask something else. Are we ready to meet something that feels like your own feature? There's something that's hard to ignore.
Hello?
No civilization truly grows in complete isolation. Growth happens through interaction, through encountering the unfamiliar, through friction with the unknown. If the universe contains countless seeds of life, maybe only a few actually manage to grow, and maybe growth itself requires connection. In that sense, hope isn't naive. It is almost evolutionary. Even if contact hasn't happened yet, believing that it can happen pushes a civilization forward. Without that openness, we stagnate. Measured against the cosmic time, our existence is incredibly brief, a short flicker. But if one day we genuinely encounter another intelligence, maybe that flicker lasts a little longer. What about the idea that we were visited in the past? Honestly, that feels more like a compelling science fiction story to me. Beautiful, romantic, but speculative. Yes, the idea of being visited and then abandoned makes the future feel mysterious. The truth that something might return one day is emotionally powerful. But emotion is not evidence, and that brings us to witnesses. People who claim encounters, messages, abductions, when you gather all of these accounts together, there is still not a single verifiable piece of concrete proof. That raises a serious question. If only certain individuals experience contact, where does that leave everyone else? Why would an advanced civilization choose methods of communication that generate fear, confusion, and trauma? Why secrecy? Why symbols? Why psychological ambiguity? If we encountered another civilization, would we behave like that? Or would we be open, visible, clear, impossible to deny? There's also another idea people often mention. Maybe they don't interfere with us because interference would cause chaos. Some present this as wisdom or restraint. But when I really think about it, that position feels uncomfortably close to arrogance. Because we're not talking about a life form that knows everything or holds absolute truth. And for a civilization this advanced, the idea that not communicating with us is a conscious deliberate choice doesn't feel very convincing to me. If they truly couldn't communicate, that would also mean a civilization this advanced somehow failed to find a solution, which doesn't add up either. And from their perspective, we are not a fully mapped, already defined civilization. There may be others like us, but who can guarantee we are identical? Every encounter is new, every moment is a first. So, I don't look at this as they choose not to communicate. I look at it as if contact is possible, they will communicate. Of course, if their intentions are hostile, that's a different conversation. We can talk about that in another video. I tend to believe that advancement and ethics usually evolve together, not perfectly, but closely. A truly advanced civilization wouldn't need shadows. It wouldn't need deception. If contact happens, I believe it will be open, collective, impossible to deny. Not something whispered in the dark. And finally, what if there really is no one else? Then we are left with something heavy. Cosmic loneliness can turn into paranoia. A universe so vast and silent that it begins to feel artificial, almost like a simulation missing expected variables. But I don't choose that conclusion, I choose hope. Not blind belief hope. Because even if contact never comes, believing that we are not alone pushes us to grow, to question, to mature. And if one day we truly meet another intelligence, I believe we will.
Hold on! They made us the pets?